What's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him.
As much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. It is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years, and the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure.
Thank you for joining us again on News Nation. Let's bring in Tulsi Gabbard, former member of Congress from Hawaii, member of the Trump transition team. It's good to see you. Do you agree that this was refreshing in terms of how the two men treated each other and the conversation?
It was. I just wish the moderators didn't get in the way. I think the American people relish and look forward to the opportunity to hear two people who are talking about their different views on issues and the differences and contrasts between the two presidential candidates in this race. I want to point to the clips that you just played, because that captured one of the moments that stood out to me, that Tim Walz was talking about how now is a time where we need Kamala Harris's steady hand of leadership, and especially with what we're seeing happening in the Middle East today, he threw out a lot of words that tried to distract away from Kamala Harris's record. Her and Joe Biden's policy on Iran was one word: don't. That was it. Clearly, Iran did not take that seriously. And why would they, when Kamala Harris and Joe Biden opened the floodgates to make Iran have access to over $100 billion of funding that they didn't have access to under President Trump, which enabled them to fund Islamist terrorist groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, allowed them to gain hypersonic ballistic missile capability for the first time ever just earlier in 2023. And experts are saying now that Iran is likely to gain nuclear weapons capabilities, potentially even before the next president takes office. J.D. Vance did a great job in contrasting that with making the very clear points about what President Trump's foreign policy resulted in. No new wars, de-escalated tensions, and he did the work that a president is supposed to do in engaging in direct diplomacy in order to accomplish that.
Hey, Tulsi, I'm going to open it up to the floor in a second, but do me a favor while I have you. Aside from the debate, we have not seen the escalation, and frankly, I didn't even see it coming, with Iran firing 200 ballistic missiles, not the kinds of things we're used to seeing from Hezbollah or even Hamas. What do you think the decision chain is for the United States in terms of what you see happening next and what America is going to have to decide is okay or not okay?
Well, I have great concerns about what the decision chain is under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I can't even answer that question for you. And today was a very good case in point of that. As Iran was launching these hundreds of ballistic missiles directly into Israel from Iran, at that very same time, simultaneously, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was calling for them to not launch those missiles, as though he wasn't even aware that that launch had already taken place. So this is one of the many reasons I have grave concerns that even in these coming months heading into this election about our own national security and the fact that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have us embroiled in multiple wars in different regions of the world, and closer to World War III and the brink of nuclear war than we ever have been before.
Tulsi Gabbard, this is Elizabeth Vargas here. I wanted to get your reaction to something that Donald Trump said today. He repeated that he thought we should blow Iran to smithereens. Do you agree with that kind of rhetoric and policy? Is that the best way to go at a time when we are on the brink, teetering on the brink of an explosive regional war in the Mideast?
I didn't see President Trump's statement today on that, so I can't comment on it, but I can comment on what I've heard personally from him, as well as what I've heard him repeat over and over again in every single campaign rally and event that he has, which is his commitment towards peace, to bring about an end to the wars that have sprung up, with the tensions that have escalated under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And again, I point back to his record as president 4 years ago. Look at the consequences, look at the results. His actions speak for themselves as to what kind of presidency he will have once again, should voters send him back to the White House.
Right. And also, you know, it wasn't just Trump. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said it's, quote, not enough to simply intercept missiles and drones. It's time for the world's leading architects of terror and their proxies to face severe consequences. A lot of voices tonight speaking out in very strong terms about strong action that needs to now be taken against Iran.
Well, there has to be a deliberate thought process and analysis that goes forward. Anyone who is jumping to conclusions to launch any war in any direction should pause and understand what the cost and consequences of that will be. There's no question about the fact that we need strong leadership at this time. Israel is under attack, and they have been under attack for quite some time. Israel is responding to this. The United States supports Israel, and I believe that negotiations and dialogue should go forward in order to see how we can prevent a World War III or an increasingly escalated regional war breaking out.
And just super quick, do you think J.D. Vance did the job he was sent to do tonight on that debate stage? Do you think he won over any undecided or wavering voters?
Yeah, I think he did. You know, I think that the stakes that are placed on all these debates are often placed on them by people in the mainstream media, that whoever has the quote unquote best performance of the night is somehow therefore more qualified to serve in office. I don't buy that context. What I saw and what I focus on is that J.D. Vance did a great job of delineating the contrast between President Trump's record and his policies and Kamala Harris's failed record and her policies. But this isn't something that he just did as a performance on the debate stage. This is something I've seen him do in the over 100 interviews that he's done with journalists. Some friendly, most adversarial. He does it in his campaign speeches. And you contrast that with Tim Walz, who, other than his kind of puff piece interview that he did with Kamala Harris and CNN, he's done virtually no interviews, answered no serious questions from journalists, and has not held Kamala Harris's record to account. And she has 4 years of a record that they're trying to run away from.
All right. Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tulsi, I'm interested in hearing your point of view as a Democrat. How did Democrats and somebody who just has a hard time voting for Donald Trump, how do you think they approached this, and what do you think they came away with?
I think that anyone who watched with an open mind, sincerely interested in listening to what both J.D. Vance and Tim Walz had to say, probably came away with a very different and positive impression of J.D. Vance, as well as the policies that he and President Trump are putting forward, perhaps than they had before, because a lot of people are getting their information from the mainstream propaganda media outlets who are very, very clearly in the pocket of the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz campaign, just as we saw with these moderators here tonight. I think J.D. did a fantastic job in talking about these issues in a way that I could relate to, that were very real and really reflect the fact that both he and President Trump are listening to the American people. You contrast that with what we hear from Kamala Harris, what we heard from Tim Walz, who had a really, really tough job tonight trying to defend Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's disastrous policies. But what we've heard from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden over the last 4 years is how great Bidenomics is, how when you look at the data, the economy is better. And they're so arrogantly dismissive of the reality of the struggles of so many Americans across the country who are dealing with the higher cost of prices in almost every aspect of the basic necessities of life. So I think that JD did a great job in communicating tonight, just as he has been, as he's done over 100 interviews in this campaign alone. We saw Tim Walz, who I think he's done virtually one interview, a puff piece with CNN and Kamala Harris by his side. And I think he had a tough job, again, of trying to defend Kamala Harris's record and did not meet the mark of even trying to make their case to the American people in a very compelling and clear way.
What was the moment today or tonight that you would walk away and say that was an important moment? That was the line or the moment that will crystallize things one way or the other?
I honestly think there were a lot of those moments on every one of the major issues. One that I will point out that I think is really important really came at the very end of the debate that I wish the moderators, had they been fair and neutral, that they would have focused on, because it is a very serious issue that we're facing, which is censorship under Kamala Harris that we've seen over the last 4 years. We have hard evidence that this has been taking place. And you have Tim Walz himself, who has said that free speech and the First Amendment is a privilege, and that it does not apply to misinformation and disinformation and hate speech. And the thing that he and Kamala Harris are not telling the American people is that they believe they're the only ones who get to decide what is misinformation and disinformation. If I had been a moderator at that debate, I would have asked about, well, okay, so you want to see certain hate speech banned because you find it offensive and hurtful and harmful. Well, would you then support banning then Hillary Clinton's hateful, offensive speech and labeling me a traitor to the country that I love and I'm willing to lay my life down for? That was deeply offensive, and it was also 100% false. So their double standard is very real. They want to protect speech that they like. They want to ban speech that they don't like. And JD was on point when he said, fundamentally, we cannot have a democratic republic unless we protect every American's right to free speech and encourage this vibrant marketplace of ideas where we can debate issues that are important to us, where more speech always wins and the best ideas will rise to the top.
I will tell you that the freedom of speech thing and, misinformation, disinformation is fascinating to me, mainly because of the amount of obvious lies that are told, and from a governmental level. But tonight, the Tiananmen Square answer was breathtakingly bad, but I'm not sure that makes a difference in America anymore, does it?
I don't know. I think that Tim Walz and his team will sell it as, well, he stumbled or this or that, or he misspoke, which is what he's trying to say.
He's a knucklehead.
But yeah, which to me is just disingenuous. If you make a mistake, own it. Take responsibility for it. I think that's what we all want from our leaders. When you screw up, take ownership, be accountable, and talk about how you will be better. The fact that this free speech issue is not being taken seriously. Sorry, I'm going to keep harping on this because of what's happened just this week. People like me and Bobby Kennedy and others who've directly seen political retaliation because of our exercising of free speech. Obviously, this is personal and important to all of us. And we know that this election is about our right to free speech, among many other issues. But to see John Kerry sitting on that panel in the World Economic Forum saying that the First Amendment is the greatest obstacle to, quote unquote, effective governance. And he said this election in the United States of America is about free speech, and therefore it's important that they win and win big so that they can remove this obstacle and get back to consensus building and governance. Free speech is getting in the way of that. So even John Kerry is saying this election is about free speech. And just like the choice in this election is between the warmongers of Kamala Harris and Dick Cheney and the anti-warmongers of Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, and Bobby Kennedy, this election, too, is about free speech in those of us who believe strongly in it, even for those that we disagree with, and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who are against free speech. These are things that all Americans should stand together on and recognize there is only one choice in this election, and that's to vote for Donald Trump.
So when you look at the free speech issue, it goes beyond just saying you can't say that. It is the total weaponization of this government, as you have experienced. Any updates on that? With you?
The federal air marshal whistleblowers came forward and exposed the truth and provided evidence about how one day after I criticized Kamala Harris on a televised national interview, talking about how dangerous the consequences would be if she were to serve as president and commander-in-chief, the very next day I was placed on a domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies that almost nobody, including members of Congress, know much about. given no reason why I was put on the list. There's no due process to say, hey, show me what you got and take me off the list. As far as I know, the last time I asked, I heard that the targeting package that the TSA built against me is still operational. I hope that Congress takes this up. I'm pursuing legal action working with Jay Sekulow and the ACLJ. Good. Because I'm not the only one who is being impacted by this. There are many Americans whose names will never make headlines who have also been wrongly targeted by this administration, specifically because of their political views and their exercise of their right to free speech.
Tulsi, as always, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being as brave as you are. I, for one, really appreciate you and Bobby Kennedy for everything that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.